And I'm starting to think that my grandma's in trouble.
Who's ready to celebrate?
I'm gonna make sure you don't go down.
To our future.
General Hospital.
Port Charles is no stranger to power struggles, but no one saw this coming. What started as quiet suspicion turned into a calculated strategy that would change the balance of influence in town forever. Brick, known for working behind the scenes and staying 3 steps ahead, finally made his move, and Sidwell never saw it coming. For months, Sidwell had been expanding his reach across Port Charles. From strategic business investments to carefully crafted alliances, he positioned himself as untouchable. On the surface, he appeared legitimate: philanthropic donations, public charm, and high-profile partnerships. But beneath that polished exterior, whispers of manipulation and hidden agendas began to circulate. Brick was the first to sense that something wasn't right. Unlike others who were distracted by Sidwell's charisma and promises of prosperity, Brick paid attention to patterns: financial irregularities, sudden shifts in corporate control, silent takeovers masked as friendly mergers. Piece by piece, Brick assembled a quiet investigation, refusing to act until he had undeniable proof. And when he finally did, Port Charles changed overnight. It began with a closed-door meeting at Sonny's office. Brick laid out documents, transaction records, and communications that revealed Sidwell's true intentions: not outright crimes, but a carefully constructed web designed to consolidate control over key institutions in town. The hospital board, the waterfront development project, even media outlets. Sidwell wasn't just building influence, he was building dominance. Sonny listened carefully, realizing the implications. If Sidwell succeeded, nearly every major decision in Port Charles would eventually pass through his hands. That wasn't ambition, that was a quiet takeover. But Brick didn't stop at exposing the plan to Sonny. He had a counter-strategy. Rather than confrontation, Brick orchestrated something far more powerful: exposure through leverage. He reached out to key players Sidwell believed were firmly on his side: investors, board members, and political figures. Privately, Brick presented evidence that Sidwell's plans would ultimately sideline them once his position was secure. Suddenly, loyalties began to shift. At the next hospital board meeting, Sidwell expected a routine vote that would grant him expanded oversight authority. Instead, he was met with hesitation, questions, delays, requests for further review. The confidence in the room had changed. Sidwell tried to maintain composure, but the cracks were forming. Meanwhile, Laura caught wind of the situation through City Hall contacts. She had initially welcomed Sidwell's development proposals, believing they would bring jobs and growth, but after reviewing Brick's findings, she realized the long-term risks. Port Charles would lose autonomy under Sidwell's concentrated influence. Laura made her position clear during a public statement: transparency and shared governance would remain priorities for the city. The message was subtle, but unmistakable. Sidwell's momentum stalled, but still he wasn't ready to give up. He arranged private meetings, attempting to repair alliances. He assured his partners that rumors were exaggerated, that Brick's involvement was merely personal rivalry. But Brick had anticipated this move too. During a high-profile charity gala, one Sidwell had heavily sponsored, Brick quietly ensured key documents were shared with investigative reporters. Nothing scandalous, nothing explosive, just enough to spark legitimate scrutiny into Sidwell's rapid accumulation of power. By the end of the evening, whispers filled the ballroom. The next morning, headlines questioned the scope of Sidwell's influence across multiple sectors. Analysts debated whether one individual holding so many decision-making positions posed a risk to community balance. Public perception shifted, and in Port Charles, perception is power. Sidwell attempted damage control, appearing on local media to reassure residents. He framed his efforts as visionary leadership, insisting he only wanted progress, but the narrative had changed. Instead of being seen as a benefactor, now he was viewed as someone consolidating too much control. Investors began reconsidering their commitments. Board members demanded revised governance structures, and the waterfront project, Sidwell's crown jewel, was temporarily paused pending independent review. The true turning point came during a private meeting between Sidwell and Sonny. Sidwell confronted him, accusing Brick of orchestrating the backlash. Sonny didn't deny it, but he made one thing clear. Port Charles thrives on balance. No single person gets to control everything. For the first time, Sidwell realized he had underestimated Brick's patience and strategic mind. This wasn't about revenge, it wasn't personal, it was about preventing a silent monopoly. With his alliances fractured and his expansion halted, Sidwell was forced to restructure his holdings. Several positions were relinquished, oversight committees were established, power was redistributed among trusted community leaders. Brick never sought public credit. He didn't attend press conferences. He didn't celebrate openly, but those who understood what happened knew the truth. He had prevented a massive shift that would have placed Port Charles under one dominant influence. Instead, a new balance emerged. The hospital regained independent oversight, the waterfront project was restructured with shared leadership, and local businesses that once felt pressured into partnerships now had room to negotiate fairly. As for Sidwell, he remained in Port Charles, but no longer untouchable. His influence reduced, his ambitions checked. He now operates within boundaries he once tried to erase. And Brick? He's back in the shadows, watching, calculating, ensuring that if another power grab threatens the city, he'll be ready again. Because in Port Charles, control doesn't belong to the loudest voice or the wealthiest investor. It belongs to those who understand the game. And this round, Brick made sure the board was reset. But if there's one thing General Hospital hands know, it's this. Power struggles never truly end. They evolve. With new alliances forming and old rivalries simmering beneath the surface, the question isn't whether another shift is coming. It's who's ready when it does. Stay tuned, because in Port Charles, the next move is always closer than you think. Port Charles may have settled on the surface, but beneath the calm, something bigger was brewing. Brick had been tracking the quiet property acquisitions along the harbor when a new name surfaced. Not Sidwell, not one of his known shell companies, but a powerful out-of-town conglomerate called Meridian Apex. On paper, they were clean. International investors, tech-driven infrastructure, forward-thinking urban renewal. Too clean. Brick dug deeper and discovered something unsettling. Meridian Apex had recently absorbed two of Sidwell's former holding companies, not directly, at least not publicly, but the timing was suspicious. Sidwell stepping back might not have been retreat, it might have been a merger. Meanwhile, Carly moved quickly to secure majority influence in the luxury hotel expansion zone. She lined up investors, leveraged long-standing relationships, and positioned herself as the stable alternative to outside interference. But during a high-level planning meeting, Meridian Apex submitted a surprise bid, larger, faster, and backed by aggressive timelines that promised immediate economic growth.
City council members were impressed. Laura was cautious. Jordan was concerned, and Brick was certain this wasn't coincidence. When Brick confronted Sidwell privately again, he didn't accuse him. He simply asked one question. "Are you still holding the strings?" Sidwell smiled, calm, composed. "Sometimes," he replied, "it's smarter to let someone else hold them for you." That was all Brick needed to hear. The strategy had shifted from direct control to proxy influence. Meridian Apex began offering generous community grants, hospital funding, infrastructure upgrades, scholarships. Public support started to tilt in their favor. Editorials praised the potential modernization of Port Charles. Even some of Sonny's contacts began to wonder if opposing them was wise. The pressure mounted. Carly realized her investors were growing nervous. Competing against a multinational corporation wasn't the same as outmaneuvering Sidwell locally. She needed stronger backing, and fast. That's when Jason stepped back into the picture. Quiet, focused, observing. Jason had been staying out of the corporate chess match, but when he reviewed Brick's findings about Meridian Apex's financial layering, he noticed irregular patterns. Funds routed through offshore accounts that traced back, indirectly, to a trust once linked to Sidwell's early ventures. It wasn't proof of wrongdoing, but it was leverage. Brick and Jason worked together to prepare a strategic counter. Instead of attacking Meridian publicly, they approached the board of directors quietly, presenting concerns about reputational risk if hidden affiliations surfaced during expansion. Corporate boards fear one thing above all: instability. Within days, Meridian's executives slowed their aggressive bidding. Deadlines were extended, expansion language softened. Their once confident rollout became cautious. Sidwell saw it immediately. Another stall, another invisible block. And this time he wasn't amused. At the Metro Court bar one evening, Sidwell crossed paths with Carly. The conversation was civil, almost friendly, but layered with meaning. He warned her that resisting progress could isolate her business long-term. She countered that Port Charles doesn't respond well to outsiders who underestimate its people. Across the room, Brick watched. Because here's what everyone was beginning to understand. This wasn't just about development anymore. It was about identity. Who shapes the future of Port Charles? Long-standing power families? Strategic guardians like Brick? Or global corporations backed by hidden partnerships? As the city council prepared for a decisive vote on waterfront control, tensions ran high. Protesters gathered outside, some supporting modernization, others demanding local oversight. Laura stood firm on transparency. Jordan increased regulatory scrutiny. Sonny reinforced his alliances quietly. And Brick? He made one final move. He arranged for a respected financial analyst, someone independent and beyond local politics, to publish a comprehensive risk assessment of Meridian Apex's proposal. The report didn't accuse, it didn't attack. It simply outlined the potential long-term consequences of concentrated infrastructure control by an external entity. The public reaction was immediate. Public support fractured. The city council delayed the vote. Meridian Apex announced they would reevaluate community alignment strategies. And once again, momentum slipped through Sidwell's fingers. This time, however, something changed. Instead of pushing back harder, Sidwell did something unexpected. He requested a private meeting with Brick, not at an office, not at a gala, but at the pier overlooking the harbor at sunset. No witnesses, no posturing. Sidwell admitted that Port Charles was more resistant than he anticipated. He acknowledged Brick's strategic discipline, but he also issued a subtle warning. Cities evolve. If you hold them too tightly to the past, they stagnate. Brick responded evenly, and if you force evolution too fast, they fracture. The two men stood in silence, watching ships move across the water, symbols of trade, movement, and change. For now, an uneasy stalemate had formed. Meridian Apex scaled back. Carly secured partial control of the expansion. Oversight committees strengthened their authority. Power in Port Charles was no longer concentrated. It was distributed. But here's the truth every General Hospital fan knows. Stalemates don't last forever. Sidwell still has resources. Brick still has foresight. And somewhere within Meridian Apex's network, decisions are being made. The next move won't be loud. It will be strategic. Because in Port Charles, power isn't just taken, it's negotiated, defended, and sometimes redefined. And the game?